You find out your partner is pregnant. Congratulations. Somewhere in the next 9 months, a child arrives. You hold it. You look at its face, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a question surfaces that you would never say out loud. Is this actually mine? That feeling, that quiet biological suspicion, is ancient, older than language, older than marriage, older than any legal system humans ever built. And for most of human history, there was no DNA test, no paternity ward, no birth certificate, just a woman, a baby, and a man who had absolutely no way to verify the one thing evolution told him mattered most. So how did they handle it? How did ancient humans navigate paternity in a world without proof? And what did they actually do when they couldn't be sure? The answer is stranger and more complicated than you think, and it starts not with humans, but with a problem that's been tormenting male animals for hundreds of millions of years. Here's the biological reality. A woman always knows her child is hers. She carried it, she felt it, she was there. A man has no such certainty. From the moment sexual reproduction evolved, males of every species face the same problem. You can invest enormous resources in a child that isn't yours. And evolution is ruthless about that. Any male who poured resources into another male's offspring passed on fewer of his own genes. So over millions of years, male brains evolved to be suspicious. Not consciously, not maliciously, just wired at a deep level to pay close attention to signs of paternity. You share this wiring with lions, langurs, and chimpanzees. Male lions that take over a pride kill all the existing cubs immediately, not out of cruelty, because it stops them investing in another male's offspring and triggers the females to become fertile again. Male chimpanzees live in groups where multiple males mate with the same females. Their answer to paternity uncertainty was to evolve enormous testicles and produce massive amounts of sperm, competing at the biological level rather than the behavioral one. That's not a joke. That's peer-reviewed reproductive biology. Humans did something different, something stranger, something that only makes sense when you understand how unusual our social structure actually is. For almost all of human prehistory, people lived in small bands. Roughly 20 to 50 individuals, everyone knew everyone, there were no strangers, and here's what most people don't realize about those groups. They were not monogamous in the way we think of it today, and they were not promiscuous in the chaotic every man for himself way either. They existed in a middle space that modern humans find almost impossible to categorize. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy spent decades studying this question. What she found in hunter-gatherer societies across the world challenges everything we assume about prehistoric family structure. In many of these groups, a concept existed that anthropologists call partible paternity. The belief, held genuinely, not as metaphor, that a child could have multiple biological fathers, that semen from different men accumulated in the womb and each man contributed something to the child's development, strength from one, intelligence from another, hunting skill from a third. This wasn't a mistake, it wasn't ignorance, it was a social technology. Among the Bari in Venezuela and the Canela in Brazil, women with multiple recognized fathers for their children had measurably higher survival rates for those children. Because each man who believed he might be the father invested in the child, brought food, offered protection, paid attention. A child with 3 potential fathers had 3 men watching out for it. In a world where infant mortality was brutal and a single bad hunting season could mean starvation, that extra investment was the difference between life and death. So the question wasn't just who is the father. The question was who acts like the father. And ancient humans, consciously or not, built social structures that made the answer as useful as possible. But partible paternity was only part of the picture, because even in groups where it existed, evidence suggests that pair bonding also existed alongside it. That some level of preferential mating, 2 specific individuals consistently choosing each other, was part of human social life long before marriage became a legal institution. And when pair bonds existed, paternity certainty mattered more. Because now there was a specific man whose investment was being counted on, and the evidence he used to assess paternity was entirely behavioral. Proximity. Who was she with? Continuity. How long had they been together? Physical resemblance. Does the child look like me? That last one is fascinating. Studies consistently show that newborns actually do tend to resemble their fathers slightly more than their mothers in the first weeks of life. Some researchers believe this is not a coincidence. That selection pressure shaped infant appearance toward paternal resemblance early, because it triggered investment from skeptical fathers. Humans read faces instinctively. We are the most face-sensitive species on Earth, and we have been doing it for a very long time. There's also the role of community testimony. In small bands, everyone was watching. A woman's movements, her associations, who she spent time with, none of this was private. The group knew, and the group talked. In a world without legal contracts, social reputation was the contract. A woman known to be faithful was treated differently than one who wasn't. A man known to care for children, regardless of certainty, earned status. Reputation shaped behavior constantly in every direction. Now let's make this real. Let's reconstruct it. Picture a band of 30 people somewhere in East Africa, roughly 80,000 years ago. A woman gives birth, the group gathers, and the man she has been sleeping closest to for the past year, the one who brought her extra meat during her pregnancy, the one who slept beside her at the fire, he looks at the infant. He looks for something familiar, the shape of the brow, the width of the nose, something that says mine. He may or may not find it, but here's the thing. The group is watching him, and the group has a memory. They remember who that woman spent her nights with. They remember who she walked with. They remember the quiet arguments, the alliances, the tensions. In a band of 30 people with no privacy and nothing to do at night but talk, everyone already knew the probable answer before the child arrived. The question was never really unanswered. It was just unspoken. And if there was genuine uncertainty, the social structure absorbed it. Other men in the band had incentive to invest too. Uncles, brothers, friends. In many hunter-gatherer societies, a phenomenon called alloparenting filled the gaps. Non-parent adults caring for children, feeding them, protecting them, teaching them. The village raising the child was not a metaphor. It was a survival strategy. Paternity uncertainty in a tightly bonded group could actually distribute investment rather than eliminate it. This is what researchers discovered by looking at bones. When archaeologists study ancient burial sites from the Paleolithic, they find family clusters. Individuals buried together who share mitochondrial DNA through the maternal line. The maternal line was certain, always, without question. So societies organized inheritance, burial rites, and kinship structures around the mother. Many early human groups were matrilineal. They tracked family through the mother's line precisely because the mother's line was the one you could actually verify. That wasn't tradition, that was logic. Then, roughly 10,000 years ago, agriculture changed everything, and it changed paternity with it. When humans settled and started farming, property appeared. Land, stored grain, livestock. Suddenly, there was something to inherit, and inheritance required legitimate heirs. You couldn't pass your field to a child you weren't sure was yours, not when your neighbor's family was watching and ready to contest it. So for the first time in human history, paternity certainty became an economic and political necessity, not just a biological preference. And societies responded by constructing entire institutions around controlling female sexuality. Virginity tests, dowries, veils, arranged marriages, women's mobility restricted, women's contact with other men monitored and punished, all of it underneath the religion and the tradition and the ceremony was a paternity verification system. The wedding ring on a woman's finger is 5,000 years of that anxiety compressed into a circle of metal. Marriage as a legal institution is fundamentally a contract about reproduction. Who produced this child? Whose it legally is? Who inherits what? The feelings are real, the love is real, but the underlying architecture was built on the same uncertainty that's been running in male brains since long before cities existed. Here's what gets me about all of this. For 99% of human history, a man looked at a newborn and made a judgment call, based on resemblance, based on behavior, based on what his community told him, based on the bond that formed through proximity and time. And in most cases, it was enough, not because it was always accurate, but because the social structures around it were designed to make it functional regardless. To ensure the child got cared for, to ensure the group held together, to ensure that the uncertainty, which could never be fully resolved, never became so corrosive that it destroyed the cooperation everyone depended on to survive. The DNA paternity test was invented in 1984, which means every father who ever lived before 40 years ago, every man who ever worked his whole life to leave something behind, whoever taught a child to hunt or fish or read, whoever sat beside a fire and felt something he couldn't name, did it without certainty. And the species didn't just survive, it built everything you see around you. That question that surfaces in the delivery room, the one nobody says out loud, it's not a modern insecurity. It's a 300,000-year-old biological inheritance, a piece of wiring so old it predates the species. The difference is that now, for the first time in all of human history, you can actually answer it. Your ancestors couldn't. They just chose to show up anyway, and somehow that was enough.